name is SiC and welcome to another hobby project video. This is a bit different from the ones that I've done before because, well, some of you that have been following the channel for a while now may notice that I have made a few Warhammer painting videos. This is not that. Today we're doing a special project because a little while ago I went to a hobby store to get some basing material. It was like a train store where they have the hobby trains and things like that, where you can build dioramas and, you know, or at least they carry all the products that you would need to build a diorama. And they also sell a large amount of Revel kits. And what I found was something that really piqued my interest, because if you've been following my channel for a while, you know that one of the games I cover the most is SWAT 4, specifically while running the Elite Force mod, doing permadeath playthroughs and things like that. And I saw this, which is a single model, a SWAT officer, which is in a 1:16 scale. It will be roughly 10 centimeters and 2 millimeters high, and it's quite interesting. It comes with a little base as well, so I figured, well, you can see it, let's see, right there. There's a couple of different bases that we can choose from, which is a little bit interesting. I'll show you right now. We've got these 4 parts that we could choose from as part of the model's base. So we have, this is kind of curved, looks kind of cool. This is more mosaic-like, which I also quite like. Then we have basic bricks, which, you know, it's a basic street, looks okay, not terribly exciting. And we just have a bland one, which, well, we could use to do anything with, really, with enough imagination. And this one is just for the base of the stand. But yeah, I figured that in this video we would build it and maybe paint it. I don't know exactly how long that would take in terms of video. I try to be a little bit more I want to make this video a bit more interesting to watch, so it should be shorter snippets of things that I'm doing. Maybe I'll break it up into 2 parts, I don't know yet. But first of all, let's begin. Well, first up, the first thing that I had to do was starting with the head. Now, the head actually consists of multiple parts. It actually consists of the helmet, the 2 sides of the head, as well as the face or the eye part. And then the helmet also takes 2 earpieces as well as the microphone. So all of these things had to be cut out. So that's what I did here. Now, next up, you see the tool that I'm grabbing right there. It is a small hobby knife from Games Workshop, which is the company that makes Warhammer stuff. And what I'm doing right here is I'm slicing off the remainders of the model that was attached to the sprue, because sometimes there is a little bit remaining there on the side and it needs to be cut off, or otherwise when you glue it together you will not get a perfect fit. So it's very important that you smooth everything down as much as you can, but you also need to be careful enough to not cut off too much of the model, because this knife is actually a surgical blade. It is extremely sharp. I actually accidentally dropped one on my leg one time and it cut through my leg, through the pants. I was wearing jeans at the time. It cut through the jeans, it cut through my flesh. It was so sharp at first I didn't even realize that it cut through my flesh, until at some point I felt my leg getting wet. At that point I was continuing on cutting things out, smoothing them down, gluing things together, and then I noticed that my leg was feeling very wet. I looked down and it was like a lot of blood everywhere. So I had to hop through my living room, get to the first aid kit, get band-aids and stuff like that to stop the bleeding. So yeah, you need to be very, very careful with this stuff. But right now everything's going okay. I'm smoothing things down and I'm doing what you would call a dry fit, which is where you don't have glue on the model yet. You just push it together to see how it fits, how it would work, and to prepare yourself for actually putting the glue on there. Because once you got the glue on there, you start pushing things together, the glue actually can dry pretty quick, and it can be a bit troublesome if you don't get it completely right the first time. But at this point I've done the dry fit, everything should fit together, and I got my glue ready to start gluing everything together. Now, one problem with the head is, or actually with this model in general, is that it doesn't actually have a lot of parts that fit together very smoothly, like they kind of lock into each other. This model doesn't have that. They have very smooth edges, and it's easy to push it in a way that upsets the model and it doesn't look good anymore. Like you got a part of the face sticking out, for example, or a head that doesn't quite fit, like the edge of the head. When you put all of these three pieces together, because the face and the side of the head, it's three pieces, yeah, it's easy to push them out of alignment, and then you get like a broken edge where later on that edge you will need to glue it to the torso, and it's a bit tricky to get everything glued together smoothly, but in the end I do manage it. It's a bit tricky and it's not like what I'm used to from Warhammer, but it fits in the end. Now, after I finished the head, it is time to get on with the helmet. Now, the helmet actually comes with two different options, and it's a bit interesting. You have a helmet that has a night vision goggle option, or at least it has the attachment for night vision goggles. It doesn't actually come with the night vision goggles. And it has an option that basically allows you to have combat goggles, which is a clear plastic that you can see through, which you can see over by the sprue and the glue. But it's something that I will not glue onto the model right now, because once I prime it, it's going to be covered and it's not going to be transparent anymore, and obviously for the glass, that's exactly what we will want in the end. So now I'm just smoothing down the parts, and we also have two ear cups that will go into the side of the helmet. But I cut them out, I smooth everything down, and then I will try a dry fit again to see how it's going to fit together exactly. Where do I need to place it? Where do I need to put the glue? And then I put everything into place. Now with the cups in place, it is time to fit the head. So I'm again trying a dry fit before putting some glue on the top of the head and putting the helmet on the face. Now, with the helmet and the cups in place, it is time to put the microphone bead onto the helmet. So this is a very thin, very small piece, and it connects to a very small part of the cups as well. It's a bit tricky, but there's a pretty clear fit as to where it should go. So on a piece this small, you don't really have to clean it up that much with the knife. You just put a bit of glue on it, you stick it into place like I'm doing here right now. And you still need to be a bit careful, of course. Everything is still pretty small, even on a quite bigger scale than this, but as you can see, it fits on there pretty well. At this point, however, I also noticed that the cup, or the glue of the cup, isn't entirely dried yet. So I'm trying to push the microphone bead onto the helmet or onto the cup a little bit more, but then I noticed that the cup is also moving a bit, so I'm trying to use the knife here to push the cup back into position to make sure that the microphone bead is in the correct place and that it will dry up in the correct position. Which, well, it's a bit tricky. Like, again, it's a very small part. So in the end, though, I manage it, I'm satisfied, and I put the head away to start on the next part. Now, it is at this point that the manual tells me to cut out the arms and the hands, or the fingers, which are all separate parts. Not every individual finger, mind you, but one of the arms doesn't have the whole hand, another arm has the hand, but is missing 3 fingers. These are all separate parts that you need to glue on there. However, I decided to skip that for now for one specific reason, which is that one of the hands, or one of the arms that is missing the whole hand, doesn't have a socket in which you could place the hand. Basically, you can rotate it freely. This is the hand that is going to hold the barrel of the rifle. And it's usually a problem with Warhammer that if you don't put them on correctly, then the barrel doesn't fit in the way that you want. So having learned from my experiences with that, I decided to skip building the arms right now and go along with the torso. Because like I said, you can turn the hand as much as you want, and if you glue it now, while you put the gun on much later, you have the chance that the hand doesn't align correctly with the weapon. And it's going to look weird, and at that point it is too late to fix it because the glue is entirely dried up and you'd have to break the model to rebuild it again. So for now, like I said, I decided to skip that part. I go on to another part, which is building up the torso, putting on all the pouches, etc. So I've cut out the 3 parts that make up the torso and cleaning up all the edges and doing some dry fitting, and finally I glue all the pieces together. This is where I run into another challenge, which is the same problem as the head, in that the 3 parts that make up the torso don't have little grooves that fit together neatly. They basically have very smooth surfaces that you need to glue together, which means it is very easy to push the different parts out of alignment, and this is what I'm struggling here with for a little bit. At some point I feel like I got it, and I notice like, oh, I don't have it entirely, so I need to push this. Which means at that point I push something else out of alignment and I break the whole thing again, so I need a little bit more glue because it's already partly dried, and then I keep messing around like that for a little while until finally I do manage to get it into a reasonable fit that I'm happy with. With the torso glued together properly, I have cut out several of the pouches that need to go onto it. Now there's actually quite a lot. There are several magazine pouches, a pouch that might have first aid kits, I don't know. There is a radio on the front of the chest, and also a bigger radio that is attached to the back of the model. Basically there's a ton of different things that go onto it. Magazine pouches, and so on. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm cutting out all of these things individually. I'm placing them into... And this is actually a really nice part of the model, in that these magazine pouches actually do come with little grooves. There's a little cut in of the inside of the torso and a little extrusion on the magazine pouches that when you put the glue on there, you can slide it into that little hole on the model. And then that is exactly where it should be, and basically you cannot misplace it, and that is something that I really quite enjoyed. You can still move them around a little bit, there's still a little bit of room for messing it up, but it is not so hardcore that like you need to figure out the exact positioning yourself. You just cut them out, you take away the excess parts of plastic that you don't need, that were part of the sprue, or for example little lines where the 2 molds came together when the sprue was pressed or made in the factory. And yeah, basically this is how I continue on. I cut out different pouches, I cut them out, I make them ready to glue them on, and then I glue them on. Next up is the legs, or at least the upper part of the legs, because the lower legs are actually separate parts. So basically we're doing the hips and the upper legs at this point. I have the rear and the front part, as well as a gun holster, a pistol holster, which is still lying on the floor, or on the table, I mean, at this point in the video. So I'm gluing these things together, and again, as with all the other parts, they don't really have the tightest fit. It is a little bit strange that, yeah, it just doesn't seem to want to go together the way that I think that it should. It's not that big of a problem. In the end, it all does work out, but in this case, it is mostly because I also have to glue on some straps, and the straps are strategically placed Now you don't see the straps now, it's a later part in the video. Sorry if that causes some confusion, but yeah, those straps that I have to glue on later on, they kind of take away the gaps. They hide the gaps that kind of remain when you push these two parts together. It's a bit of a weird way to do things, but well, what can I say? It's how they did it, and in the end you don't really see it, but it feels wrong when you put it together. It's a little bit strange. With the upper legs and the pistol holster taken care of, it is now time to put together a rather big bag that is also going to be attached to the upper legs on the other side of the pistol holster. Now what you just also did see me do is turn on the LED lights that is covering my workspace. This is something I recently built for myself. I had the workspace for a long time. Basically it holds all of my paints, my tools and stuff like that. And recently I put a metal strip from one side of the other because it's kind of like an L shape. And then in the L shape I put a metal strip from one point to the other point, so it all kind of gets stuck together and it keeps position a little bit better. On top, or on the bottom I mean, of that LED strip, or of that metal strip, I put a LED strip which provides me with a little bit of extra light, and that's what I turned on right now. Anyway, this is a big bag that holds medkits or ammunition or something, I don't know exactly what, but yeah, I glued it all together, and the next step would be to put that onto the leg along with the straps. Now with the straps cut out, I put some glue on it and I put them onto the model. Now what you can see on the model, maybe around the belt area, is a little gap, and this strap fits into that little gap, and it also fits, well, there's no gap for it where it's supposed to touch the pistol holster, but there is a part of the pistol holster that is supposed to be aligned with this strap. Now this is a little bit strange because, like I said, they don't have this little gap where that should fit. You just kind of have to figure it out for yourself. So if you're not careful, you can have a strap going nowhere, and it doesn't look like it's attached to the pistol holster, which, well, it really should be. Otherwise it doesn't make any sense for that strap to be there. So it's a little bit strange that on one part you have this gap and on the other part you don't have it. But yeah, a little bit of common sense, I guess, should make things a little bit clear. But yeah, now this is where I run into a bit of a problem. Right here I have cut out a strap, and I'm trying to make it fit along with the big bag in a little while, but it turns out it doesn't really fit. And I'm curious, like, how does that work? What is the problem? And it turns out I actually cut out the wrong piece. So I'm fumbling around a little bit, but there's another strap on the sprue that I actually should have cut out instead of this one. And that one fits very nicely, but this one, it just doesn't want to fit. So I'm messing around and it just doesn't want to work. But in the end I figure it out and then I cut out the correct strap and glue it into place. At this point I have found the correct strap and I'm gluing it into place. It's a bit of a double step because first I have to glue it onto the big bag, and then I have to glue the big bag onto the upper legs, and then make sure that the upper part of the strap connects to the belt that my character is wearing. And this is another thing that is a little bit strange, in that the straps kind of want to stick up out of the model, or at least out of past the belt, which is where the torso should go. And it feels weird, like it should feel like that is going to align exactly with the belt, as well as where the strap should end with other parts like the pistol holster, the big bag and so on. it actually doesn't. These parts actually stick out a little bit, and that is what is throwing me off a little bit here, because my thinking was that everything should be a perfectly tight fit, and in the end it turns out that the torso actually sticks out over the straps, a little bit over the belt, and it obscures it a little bit. But my feeling was that if this is not flush with the belt, then the torso isn't going to fit properly. So this is another thing that I was struggling with a little bit in attaching these straps, because I felt that these should align perfectly, and yet no matter what I did on one side or the other, they just wouldn't fit perfectly flush. So in the end I decided to just go for what felt best. I made it flush with the part that it connects to, so I made it flush with the pistol holster, with the big bag and so on, and I let it stick out just a little bit around the belt, figuring that I could cut off a part of it if I needed to make it flat. In the end though, it turned out that I didn't have to do that. So yeah, all turns out well in the end. Now at this point there are some pistols, and well, not pistols, there's one pistol, there's a pistol magazine pouch and another pouch that I don't know exactly what it's for. Maybe it's holding a silencer of some kind, I don't know exactly, but it's a little bit rounder than the other one. I've got those out of the sprue, I'm cleaning them up, and then I'm attaching them to the side of the torso as well as the pistol holster. Well, not the torso, the upper legs, I mean. Sorry. It's a bit confusing. English is not my native language. Sometimes I get a bit confused and I'm thinking ahead of what I'm already saying, and I mess things up just a little bit sometimes. Something I'm trying to work on. Now what you just saw was another part that I struggled with a little bit. I sped it up times a lot, times 10, but the pouches that go along with the pistol holster, they didn't quite fit. There were little holes in the pistol holster and little extrusions on the pouches, which leads me to believe that they should fit together, but in trying to position them, sorry, I just had a lot of trouble making it fit. So in the end I went for something that probably isn't entirely right, but it works. And if you don't really look at it, you might never notice. If you're just looking at the rest of the model, like, it's a small detail. It might be wrong, it might be right, I'm not entirely sure because of the way it all fit together. But in the end, I don't think it's that much of a big deal. Now, what you're looking at right now is me trying to fit the torso together and figuring out what to do with the straps. So at this point I'm also like pushing the straps back a little bit because, you know, all of these things I've attached, I've glued them together. Parts of it are sticking out, some of them are not entirely dry yet because I'm going through the steps. Maybe I should wait for that a little bit longer, but I don't have that much patience, and it also does allow me to make sure that if it doesn't entirely fit, I have time to adjust these things. You do need to be a little bit careful about that, of course, as you push things out of alignment pretty quickly. But being careful, you can do a lot. Now, the upper legs are finished, and at that point we continue on with the lower legs. Now, the lower legs are actually fairly simple. They consist of 4 parts, 2 parts for each leg. Basically, you have the knee pad, you have the lower leg, the foot, and the only thing that is different or stands apart from that leg is the sole of the foot, which is a very strange thing to do, because if you can make that whole leg out of one part, I don't understand why you would cut off the soles of the feet, except maybe the very one reason, in that if you look at shoes normally, there is a bit of a separation between the soles and the shoe itself. And in the end, when you look at the model, you do see that little bit of a gap where you feel like, okay, the soles are a separate part of the shoe that were glued on. not just on the model, but in real life they also get glued on, I think. So in the end, yeah, it does work out, and when I talk about it, it actually makes a little bit of sense why they would do this on this scale of model, because it is a very big scale. You can see a lot of detail, and something like that would definitely show up if you made it one part. Maybe you wouldn't be able to make it that detailed if you didn't put it into two parts. Anyway, I cut out the legs, I'm cleaning them up, and then I'm attaching the soles. With the lower legs done, I now decide to glue them on to the upper legs immediately to give them some time to dry before I put everything else together, because I'm thinking that I will have to use a bit of force to attach the torso to the upper legs, and in doing that I might actually push the lower legs out of alignment again if I do it all at the same time. So I figured, yeah, this would be a good time. Now, I did make a mistake here looking at the legs and the numbers, because of course there's a left leg, a right leg, and I didn't keep track of which leg goes on which side. I did figure it out just by looking at the leg and which side would have the big toe, but it is something I should have kept better track of. It could have been a little bit tricky there, but of course, like I said, in the end everything works out. Moving on, we have to cut out the weapon, which comes in several parts. There is of course the main body of the rifle, but along the barrel there is a rail guard, I think, or a something, you know, the barrel, because the barrel heats up, there's a part around it that makes sure that your hands don't touch the burning metal of the barrel. I think it's called the hand guard or something, I'm not entirely sure about my terminology there, but that is a part on one side of the weapon. Then we have a flashlight which goes on the top of the barrel. We have a little scope which goes on top of the rifle, and I think that's about it. So again, I'm cutting them out, I'm cleaning them up, I'm dry fitting them before putting them together with glue. Now at this point I have glued nearly everything together, except for the arms. So at this point I figure that I would attach the torso. And again, I'm not really, I'm following the instructions of the manual, but I'm out of experience building Warhammer models. I am not following the exact order. Like, I'm putting the different parts together with the exception of the arm, and then now I'm gluing everything together before I finish the arm, because I want to do the arm and the weapon at the same time, or both arms and the weapon at the same time. So I figure, you know, I will glue together the legs and the torso, and after that I can get started on the arms, and then I will fit the arms and the weapon together before finally attaching the head in a way that feels right to me, because when I looked at the manual it seemed like I could attach them in two different ways, looking up a little bit or looking down a little bit. There's a little bit of wiggle room there to make him look the way you want, which is kind of nice. It's something I enjoy, but I have to be honest, it does not have a lot of wiggle room, at least not as much as a Warhammer model would, because most of the Warhammer models, they come with like a little ball at the bottom of a head. And the torso has a little, well, not a ball, but the opposite, you know, like a place that the ball fits into. And then you can twist the head in any way that you like, up, down, sideways, and so on, to give him a particular look. And that gives you a lot of flexibility that this model doesn't really have. But in the end, you know, this one isn't really designed to give you that. Warhammer models are. So I can't complain about it. And it's nice that there's a little bit of wiggle room anyway. Here I've cut out both of the arms. I've put them separately from each other to remember which part goes where. Now the right arm isn't that complicated, it's just missing the 3 fingers. So you just glue them into place and that's it, it's not too special. However, the left arm, like I said, has an arm that you could rotate 180 degrees in the wrong direction, and that makes things a little bit more tricky. So in the end, yeah, I waited a little bit until the rest of the model was stuck together, and I just needed to attach the arms and the weapon and the head. The head isn't that much important, but the arms and the weapon, in my opinion, really should be fitted on together at the same time to make sure that everything fits together in a way that looks correct. At this point, I'm getting ready to glue the weapon into the hands. And yeah, the way I figured would be the best way is to put a little bit of glue in each of the hands and then put the weapon inside and push it into position. However, this is another tricky part of putting this model together. I'm messing around a little bit with getting the left hand in the correct angle. At the same time, I'm pushing the weapon, or like the arms off of the torso. I'm pushing the weapon out of one hand, and then I'm pushing it out of the other hand, and then I'm pushing the arm out of position again. And in the end, I have to pull the weapon back a little bit, put some more glue on the side, and keep messing around a little bit until I find the position that works for me. Now, one thing I was careful to do was make sure that the trigger finger was flush with the side of the trigger guard, or at least around the trigger area, that it wasn't pointing upwards or downwards of it, but it was roughly around the same height. Now, in doing that, the left arm, which is holding the barrel, actually holds the very end of the barrel in a way that looks a little bit strange to me, but again, maybe people do hold it like that. I'm not an expert, and it was more important to me that the trigger finger looked correct on the placement of it on the weapon looked correct, more so than where the character holds the barrel of the rifle. It's always a little bit tricky. You don't have a lot of wiggle room with these models, so in the end you just kind of have to go with your gut feeling. And my gut feeling told me that the right hand was more important in terms of placement than the left hand. So in the end, that's what I'm going for. After a long time of messing around, I am content with how the arms and the hands are attached to the body and the weapon. And the only thing that is left to do is attach the head. So at this point, I dry fitted it together again to see how exactly I wanted it to go, and then I put a little bit of glue around the neck area on the torso. Finally, I put the head into place and twisted it ever so slightly to make it stand in a way that looked correct or cool to me. And that is it. That is the final model, all fit together. The very last thing to do, of course, is to create the stand on which the model will be resting or standing. So this comes in three parts. We have the main body of the stand, of course. We have the bottom, which I was working on before I set this. Now the inside of this had a frame to make sure that this part holds the correct position while in the box, I guess. But the bottom just goes into the bottom of the base like that, in a pretty specific way. Actually, it was a little bit trickier getting it into position than I would have thought. I just put the glue all around the edge of the base, and then I slide in the bottom. But it really, it does take a little bit more work to make it fit flushly along all the edges than I thought it would. Finally, I have to pick a floor type, of which we had four. We had a regular one, like a perfectly flat one that you could use your imagination for. We had a mosaic one, we had a regular brick one, and we had this curved brick one. And in the end, I decided to go for the curved brick rather than the mosaic. The regular bricks were a bit too boring. The flat one, I don't have enough basing material to make it look realistic at this scale. So in the end, I decided to go for the curved bricks because it's an interesting look, and it might look a little bit more common rather than the mosaic. Not everybody has this mosaic. It might be in a fancy place, but with the curved brick, it could be really in anybody's back garden. Like, I'm looking at it, I'm just, what do I do? What do I want? Which one looks best in the end? The mosaic, it's kind of cool. Don't get me wrong, I kind of like it. But in the end, I decided to go for something that would be a little bit more commonplace rather than the mosaic tiles. So I put some glue on it, I stick it on there, and finally I attach the model itself, and we are done. Well, that's the end of this video. I did decide in the end to split it up into two parts because the building, well, took me roughly an hour and a half, I'd say. It was quite interesting because it's very different from building a Warhammer kit. Warhammer kits, they're much smaller, of course, so the connections between the arms and the torsos and the legs, they're a little bit different, a little bit easier to manipulate than this thing is right here. Particularly putting the gun stock in his hands is, well, that's always a problem in Warhammer as well, and it was a problem here. It took me a little while to figure it out and get it into a position that felt natural, felt good, with the trigger finger around the trigger guard. This hand at the end of the barrel feels a little bit off, but that's, well, the position I managed to get. Overall, yeah, it was a fun build, and yeah, managed to get it done. Particularly also the straps around the waist were quite interesting, were quite difficult to get into position. But they do kind of hide the gaps where the pieces of the model come together, so that is actually quite nice, quite ingenious. And there's a lot of 3D detail on this model. I'll just get a little bit closer so you can see a little bit more, but this guy, yeah, there's a lot of detail on him. It will be fun to paint. He's quite large, so I can really go nuts on the details, and I think I will. The only thing that's left to do is a piece of goggles on his head. I haven't painted that on there, or glued it on there, of course, because once I prime this, yeah, it's going to cover the clear glass plastic as well, and we don't want that. So I'm going to have to paint the whole model first, and then I have to glue the goggles onto his helmet. But I hope you guys enjoyed it. I enjoyed building it. I will see you guys for the painting video, which will be quite different from this one, of course. So, hope to see you then.